A very good morning, Team Zimbabwe, and welcome to Africa and Beyond Television Network, and a very good afternoon to others as well. My name is Ronald Makusha. So this afternoon, let us take a look on what is happening at SADC. SADC is scheduled to hold an extraordinary summit for the heads of state starting on 20 May. And the programs are starting tomorrow, that is the 14th of May. They are going to start with these programs, and they will run through some programs up to 20 May. And they've put on the agenda El Nino drought. So they need to strategize a response to El Nino drought. And there is something very important to note as all these things happen. SADC has successfully ignored the plight of the people of Zimbabwe, as well as the plight of the people of DRC. Remember, Zimbabwe and DRC are actually facing crisis. Both countries and both people are facing crisis, and SADC is actually ignoring these two countries. There is no meaningful action happening in these countries to make sure that they deal with the humanitarian issues there. So Zimbabwe is facing a political crisis which emanated from the 2023 rigged elections. And DRC is also facing a crisis which emanates from civil war, which is actually happening. And the government in DRC is not showing any interest in making sure that they deal with this issue. SADC sends a military aid to DRC, but they are not doing enough to deal with this whole situation. It doesn't need a military confrontation. It needs a dialogue. It needs to put all people on the table, then agree on what to do. So these are two countries facing crisis. Zimbabwe facing political crisis and DRC facing war crisis. But this is something very important. If you take a look onto the headline right here on the screen, SADC is going to hold an extraordinary summit on the humanitarian situation resulting from the El Nino-induced drought. And they've totally ignored DRC. They've totally ignored progress on Zimbabwe. We were expecting to see SADC talking about the crisis in Zimbabwe, since they have acknowledged that Nelson Chamisa wrote to them and they have responded to Nelson Chamisa, or they've started engaging Nelson Chamisa. We wanted them to openly deal with this matter in terms of progress, in terms of what they agreed from the previous summit. But Zimbabwe is not on the agenda. DRC is not also on the agenda. So they report that the Southern African Development Community SADC on 20 May 2024 hold a virtual extraordinary summit of heads of state and government to discuss the humanitarian situation in the region following the ongoing El Nino-induced drought that has negatively impacted the lives and livelihoods of an estimated 58 million people. So this extraordinary summit, it is going to be chaired by the president of Angola, and is chairing it in his official capacity as the chairperson of SADC. Then this summit is going to discuss measures to mitigate the impact of El Nino-induced drought and address the food and nutrition security in the SADC region. One of the key problems of SADC is that they wait for a crisis to happen so that they start to sit together to talk. El Nino was reported way back, well in time for them to prepare. They never met to prepare. They never sat down to prepare as well. And right now, Zimbabwe is actually exploding the same way DRC is exploding. And they seem not to care much about, they will sit down today, they will talk for just a few minutes, and they act as if they are acting, they leave it like that. So also during this summit, they're expecting to launch a humanitarian appeal which highlights the population affected, their prioritized needs, and a call for immediate support from regional and international partners to address the needs of the affected population. So they are now going out with the begging bowl, but they will not actually involve the people who are affected. For example, I can tell you this. there is no plan or a clear plan by SADC to agree on sustainable agriculture activities. They do not care. So if you take a look on Zimbabwe, it does have so many dams which are underutilized. We can talk about Lake Mtirikwi, it's underutilized. We can talk about Tugwemkosi, it's underutilized. There is also another dam, Rikumsoro Tugwemkosi, Rakanga Richishandiswa all these years, which is also underutilized. There is no meaningful irrigation schemes running in Zimbabwe, and they would have dealt with this issue. Also, they are sitting on a very massive project of Rundetende Dam, which could have been very effective in mitigating droughts, especially in Zimbabwe. And if they were serious about making sure that they prioritize irrigation schemes, we would have seen them dealing with these all issues. They were supposed to sit down way back to deliberate on these issues, but they are doing so now. So on 14 May, there's going to be a joint meeting of ministers responsible for agriculture, water, energy, and disaster risk management. And on 18 May, the meeting of the SADC Standing Committee of Senior Officials is going to take place. And on 19th May, the meeting of the SADC Council of Ministers is going to meet. Then on 20 May, you are going to see an extraordinary summit for the heads of state and the government. So this is going to be done virtually. And they are using Article 10 of the SADC Treaty of the SADC Summit of Heads of State and Government, which they say is responsible for overall policy direction and control of functions of the community, making it supreme policy-making institution of SADC. So it's good that they highlight that this is the supreme policy-making institution in SADC. But do they make policies which can be implemented? Do they make policies which can be effected? That is what we need to know as the people, because you cannot continue to hold summits when nothing is happening. They held summit on Zimbabwe, and I think it's twice when they held summit on Zimbabwe. They also held summits on DRC and Zimbabwe combined, but nothing meaningful is coming out of these issues. So during this summit, here are the key takeaways. They are going to talk about the El Nino-induced drought, and they are going to direct a policy in making sure that they deal with this issue. Here's the problem. The problem is they have ignored deliberately the issue of Zimbabwe. They've ignored deliberately the issue of DRC. It's because they don't want to hold accountable the two heads of states in these countries. And this is the problem. So citizens of these countries are on their own. That is the reason why there are calls for massive protests when the SADC summit is going to happen in Zimbabwe. People are calling for massive protests so as to send a clear message to SADC and its partners. And this makes us ask this question: will these protests happen? Will SADC stop its summit because of this protest? That is another question for another day. So it is what it is. This is what is happening. And the major issue is SADC has successfully ignored crisis in Zimbabwe as well as DRC, as they are preparing for the summit, which is going to be held on 20 May 2024. It is what it is. My name is Ronald Ukoma Kusha. Let us